Good evening and welcome to the regular session of Findlay City Council, the December 1st, 2020 meeting. We will start with the roll call.
Mr. Greeno.
Present.
Mr. Haas.
Here.
Mr. Hellman.
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Here.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Russell. Mr. Schindeldecker.
Here.
Mr. Slough.
Here.
Ms. Warnicki. Here. And Mr. Wobser.
Present.
Mr. Russell called me prior to the meeting to let me know he wasn't going to be here. I'll entertain a motion to excuse Mr. Slough.
I would move to excuse the absence of Mr. Russell.
Second, Mr. Wobser. All those in favor of excusing Mr. Russell from tonight's meeting say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. He is excused. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Short prayer.
I will entertain a motion to accept the City Council meetings of November 17th public hearing and November 17th regular session of City Council. Mr. Slough.
I would move to accept, have approved the minutes of the public hearing for November 17th and also the regular session of City Council.
Second, Mr. Niemeyer. Do we have to do them individually or can we do them together? All those in favor of accepting the public hearing minutes and the regular session of City Council minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. They are accepted. Mr. Schindeldecker, do we have any add-on replacements or removals from tonight's agenda?
We do, Mr. President. We have an add-on letter from City Auditor Stasiak regarding Corona Relief Fund House Bill 614 distribution and companion ordinance number 2020-137, Corona Relief Fund House Bill 614 redistribution. I move to add these items to tonight's agenda.
Second, Mr. Slough. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adding the items to tonight's agenda say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. They are added. We have no proclamations, no recognitions or retirement resolutions. We have no oral communications. Petitions.
A letter from City Clerk Kathy Launder regarding the status of Amber Waves development annexation, as well as a letter from the agent for the petitioner, Phil Rooney, regarding to rezone it.
Questions or comments? Hearing none, petition to be on hold in the clerk's office until January 23rd, 2021. We have no written communications, reports of municipal officers and municipal departments.
Officer shareholders disclosure form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for Royal Buffet 168 Incorporated, doing business as Royal Buffet, located at 2551 Tiffin Avenue, for a D1 liquor permit. A check of the record show no criminal record for those who applied.
Mr. Slough.
I would move no objection be filed.
Second, Mr. Haas. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor that no objection be filed say aye. Those opposed, nay. No objection will be filed.
Officer shareholders disclosure form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for Amy Mae's Downtown LLC, located at 331 South Main Street, Findlay, for a D5 liquor permit. A check of the record show no criminal record for those who applied.
Mr. Slough.
I would move no objection be filed.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion.
I've got a question.
Yes, Mr. Hellman.
Is this a restaurant downtown that was reprimanded for not obeying the governor's distancing and wearing a mask?
Ms. Mayor.
Yes, it was. They have since been following, been following the regulations and have been working with the health department. I think they've learned their lesson.
Let's hope that continues. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Niemeyer.
That's compared to the first one. The first one's a new license at Royal Buffet, and the second one's a transfer, right?
Well, a D1 and a D5 are two different types of licenses. I can't give you the specifics on what one is over the other. If that's a question for our mayor or our
Just for
law
application.
director. Go ahead.
Just for application.
Application,
Yes. So the classifications are for different types of applications and what they'll be able to serve, but I believe you are correct in that the Royal Buffet is a new application and Amy Mays is a transfer of license.
Thanks, thank you.
any other questions or comments? We have a motion and a second that there be no objection filed. All those in favor of no objection being filed, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. No objection will be filed.
A letter from Hancock Regional Planning Commission Director Cordonier regarding the City of Findlay revolving loan fund request for appropriation for Dots in Color Incorporated.
Questions or comments? Mr. Niemeyer.
I'm just curious, what is dots in color? And
Go ahead.
I always thought there was a cap on this, like to a certain amount, but evidently there isn't for the amount of the loan.
Mr. Stashak might have the answer for that. And
I
then
can speak to
Mr. Wobser had
Dots,
a
yeah.
question or a comment also.
I serve on your RLF board as ex officio. This particular business is a sewing business down on it's Tiffin Avenue. That's the current owners are leaving the business. This is a new owner taking over the business. They've secured bank financing, and then this is alternative financing. This particular component of the RLF loan cannot exceed 50, I believe it's 50% of the entire package or purchase cost of the business. I can also share, just as a side note, this is exactly what you want in your community. You want these very successful businesses, and as we review these, we look at what's going on in terms of how they're performing, and this business is doing very, very well in your community in terms of the amount of sales it has. It's a particular line of equipment that not many people represent, and it was interesting to hear the excitement on the call regarding the sewing business, which surprised me, and it was refreshing. So it's neat to see this happen. It's good for you, and this is what you want. You want small, locally owned businesses that are non-franchised as much as possible. It really benefits you on the bottom line. So I hope I've answered your question and I've helped.
Just a second, Mr. Wobser.
I was just going to add to Jim's comments. The sewing business is the one next door to Dietz's on Tiffin Avenue. Little place has been there forever. Family's going out, or
40
selling
years.
40 years, and they've been there just extremely successful.
Yeah.
They're selling their business and retiring, so it's really kind of cool what they've done there. It's one of those businesses, and probably never knew it was there really, unless you're into sewing, and then that would be like Mecca.
Mr. Sloughton.
Do they do alterations? Or is it machines? Or
Well,
both?
Jim, that's a great question. That was part of the discussion. The major or the majority of the sales revolve around the machinery, but they also do other things there as well. You know, I don't know how much is done in the building there, but they sound like an all-around business. But the woman who spoke on behalf of the business, I believe, is becoming the owner. You know, just wonderful knowledge of how to be successful, what she needs to do, and it definitely appears to have the energy that it's going to take. And they're going all in. They're making a heavy investment here in our community.
Thank you, sir.
Do you need
They sell.
Yeah, I do.
They sell sewing machines in there that are in the thousands of dollars, and they are regional business. My wife is quite a sewer, and we spent a lot of money in there. And Christmas is coming up. Any other questions? If not, letter to be filed.
Board of Zoning minutes for October 8th, Board of Zoning Appeals minutes for October 8th, 2020.
Questions or comments? Hearing none, minutes will be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Thomas regarding Madison and Monroe Sewer Replacement Project number 3569170.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
City Planning Commission agenda for December 10th, 2020, as well as the minutes of November 12th, 2020.
Questions or comments? Agenda to be filed, minutes to be filed.
Letter from City Auditor Stashak regarding credit card reader for utility billing department.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Safety Director Schmelzer regarding milling machine.
Questions or comments? Mr. Hellman.
I have a question regarding this, but I don't know if you're going to be bringing it up now or bringing it up later.
Well, it's just a letter now.
Well, Mr. Smelser's here.
Whenever.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've looked at this, but I was just curious when I read this. When you talk about buying a milling machine for $370,000 and it'll save us money,
Yeah.
I take it that you have added in the personnel costs that it may take to run this thing, insurance, place to house it. I mean, I don't know where you even house a milling machine, but I'm sure it doesn't sit out in the rain.
Yeah.
Maintenance costs and things of that nature. And we're
Yes.
still gonna come out ahead.
Yes, in the letter, I alluded to the fact that we're already operating this machine, so that takes away manpower. That also can take away storage. I also alluded to the fact that we're looking at trading in two pieces of equipment. One is a much larger piece of equipment, that's a curb machine, and the other is an asphalt zipper, which is a smaller model of the same thing that we're doing now. If you have a couple extra minutes, I'll give you some history.
I would love some history.
What the street department used to do, and this was probably one of the biggest points of contention between my friend Mr. Hans and I when I first got here. The street department was essentially building roads. And because of force account limits, what they were doing is running curb down one side of the street one year, running curb down another side of the street another year, and then they would pave the street the third year. There are bidding requirements, force account limits. Don or Jim could probably get into the weeds with you on that, but essentially what it requires is for public works departments to bid against contractors when you exceed a $50,000 limit. So the street department was essentially building roads in that fashion. What it did was tore up the street for 3 years in a row. So we started to examine how we really wanted to go about doing things long term, and in my opinion, what our public works department is better suited to doing is being more tactical with what it accomplishes. So when we bid out small jobs, we get our lunch eaten by contractors who have to come in and do small things instead of doing very large scale things. There are guys that are very, very good at laying down thousands of feet of curb. Our guys don't have to do that all the time. So what we've started to do is transition from trying to build roads into being that tactical unit that takes care of all of our repairs and maintenance. And when you do that, you need different pieces of equipment. Instead of a curb machine that lays thousands of feet of curb en masse and a zipper that can do a little bit of planing in alleys and things like that, what we really want to do is work with the engineering department and combine our efforts with the bids that we're doing for curbs and go in and do stretches of asphalt, take care of the alleys that need graded in addition to paved. And the equipment that you're looking at here is just much more better suited to accomplish that right now. So over the last 2 years, what the street department has done is leased this piece of equipment. $50,000 a year for 2.5 months. Now, it's worked well. So we were originally looking at taking a look at this for the capital year for next year. When they started to look at it, we started to plan for it. Dave was made aware of a 2019 model that's brand new, that the vendor said, hey, I can put a hold on this for a few weeks. If you guys are interested in it, you can save 20 or 30,000 bucks over buying a new one. And that's sort of where this urgency, for lack of a better word, comes into play. There's no real reason why we would have to move forward with this, except for the fact that we have no guarantee that we're going to be able to buy that 2019 unit. He said he could hold it for a couple weeks, but after that, it's really up to anybody else. So if we can figure out a way to pay cash or put a purchase agreement together and get it done, we can save some money. If you want to wait, we'd have to do that too. That's why it's on your agenda, just letting you know that if we can get something done, you'll see it in your next meeting.
Mr. Wilson.
Go ahead. Paul, did you have, I didn't want to cut you off.
Nope, done.
Paul, so it's 50,000 a year for 2.5 months that we're using it. Will we be able to use it longer than 2.5 months? So is that,
Yes, sir. That's
so
the whole point.
So actually it gets a little bit better in that regard too, right?
Correct.
Because we're looking at 7 years, 370 versus 50K, 7 years worth of lease payments?
Yeah, and actually, we're gonna get, about 50,000, in trade-ins.
Okay, so you're thinking our total is really gonna be 320?
Yeah. In that
Ballpark.
range.
Yeah.
And that's, that's 50K on a 2.5 month use period. So.
Right.
We could very easily double that.
Okay.
In the
That's-
time frame that we can get done annually. So the ROI, depending on how you look at it, it's 3 to 7 years. And based on the number of hours that you can get out of a piece of equipment like this, you can easily get 10 to 12 to 13. Our guys take good care of stuff. They might get 15 years out of this thing.
Okay, no, that makes sense on the 2.5, that lowers the ROI down significantly then if we can get more time out of it, but.
Right.
So the 2019 model is still good enough versus the 2021 model?
Yeah, it's basically the same. There are no 2020 models even available
Okay.
for purchase right now, because I did check into that. And really, it was just kind of by happenstance that, Brian, does a good job working with all the departments, trying to stockpile everything that we want to get done in terms of capital.
Yeah.
This was on the list just because, again, they've gone through this for 2 years now. And it doesn't, take a rocket scientist to figure out that leasing for 50 grand for 2.5 months isn't the best thing to do. So when we started really trying to nail down pricing, this opportunity became available. And I talked to the guy the other day, and he said, he's working with the manufacturer, and we still have a hold on it. But like any other vendor.
Right. One last question before Danny jumps in there. We're gonna get rid of the small, what'd you call it, screw?
It's called an asphalt zipper. I
Zipper.
don't even know if that's actually the formal name for it, but that's
That's what we
the
call it,
name for
right? Okay.
The biggest difference, there are 2 differences. One is the width that it's
Yeah.
able to mill. But the biggest is the accuracy with which you can set grade. So you can set elevation
Yep.
with this Bomag planer. With the zipper, what you're basically doing is dictating a thickness of mill that you want to take off.
So you just leave the bumps there.
And then you set it in. You're exactly right. So when you go to repave, you're either tweaking this thing to a ridiculous degree to set grade while you're doing it, which is basically virtually impossible.
Right.
Or you're milling off a certain thickness and you're going back in and putting it back down. And that's okay when, you're maybe just redoing an alley and that grade has to be maintained. But when you're in a street situation, when, we're in areas where we're just milling down a certain amount, but we want to maintain a certain reveal on a curve, or we want to make sure that we have grading in very flat areas along an existing road so that we maintain drainage. You're actually able to set a grade and it will automatically adjust the amount that it planes off the road. So it gives us a much better paving job when we're done for drainage and does it a lot faster.
Mr. Hellman?
Well, one last thing, what do you need from council tonight? You need just a nod ahead?
I don't need anything tonight.
Okay.
What I had originally planned to do was just put together an ordinance that said, hey, we want to do this. Good, bad, or otherwise, that's kind of what I end up doing, is looking at things in more simple terms than are sometimes necessary. And to me, this looks like a no-brainer. So I just said, hey, we'll put a piece of legislation together that says, you guys can give us the option to put together a purchase contract. We'll work it out so that we make it an annual payment, or we do it lump sum. What you're basically doing is saying, yeah, it's a good idea. I couldn't get to the point where I worked out that language, so I just basically gave you a letter that said, if we still have this opportunity, come your next meeting, you'll see an ordinance. If you still think it's a good idea and everything's in line, I think we should buy it.
Mr. Wilson?
So Paul, Mike, so we don't really have the detail yet that we need to know to make a to make a decision on it, right? Because we don't know how we can buy it yet, what the purchase agreement's gonna look like. We're gonna have to pay cash for it, or we're gonna pay for it in installments, or what's your thoughts there?
Well,
I guess I'm just looking at timing, right?
Right, I'm looking at, your question has 2 parts. One, do you have all the details that you need tonight to make a decision? No.
No,
But you're not being asked to make a decision tonight.
understood.
Right, you're being informed about what we're looking at. So if I can get all the information put together for you, by the next meeting, you will have all the information you need, which would be a choice. Pay cash, or here are the terms of a purchase agreement.
Okay.
Now, in general, the terms that have been worked out so far, verbally, or somewhat in writing, is that we would get a trade-in value for our equipment, that we would be given options for the number of years that we would want to pay this off in. There's a corresponding interest rate, in round numbers, call it 2.7%. And that we would have, for $20,000, a 5-year warranty, bumper to bumper, exclusive of teeth. And we wouldn't have to start paying for this until 2022. The original thought process was that I wasn't sure exactly, you raised your eyebrow, we wouldn't have to pay for it because they're already getting value out of our equipment.
Yeah. Oh, so they're gonna use that as a down
Also,
payment?
what's that?
They're gonna use that as a down payment? Our equipment as a down payment? I mean, they're.
Yeah,
not
but they're
at-
giving us 50 grand in cash.
Okay. I mean, it's just unusual, they're gonna give us a year.
Right. Well, that was also negotiated, because
Oh, well done.
the equipment is gonna break down. If it's gonna last for us, it's gonna perform well in the first year. And that's just the way this stuff is.
Sure.
So if we don't have to lay significant dollars out, we get to use the piece of equipment for the first year. We have a warranty for the next 4. We have all the flexibility in the world to fit within the current SCM&R budget, given the fact that we're leasing this for $50,000 a year right now. So all I'm trying to do is give you the most flexibility possible with regard to your options for purchase. One is a simple purchase agreement with an annual payment. The other would be lump sum cash.
Okay.
The difference between the two effectively is interest.
Yeah. And the reason I brought it up, Paul, was if you thought we'd have enough information, I'd throw it to appropriations, we'd get through this, and then we could just bring it in a committee report at the last meeting, make a decision then, because my guess is you're gonna want this done before the end of the year, correct?
I'm gonna want it done before the piece of equipment is sold.
Well, thank you. But
So, I mean, yeah, that could be before the end of the year. Maybe nobody else buys it and we get to do it after the first year. I don't know. All I can tell you is I don't control that.
Understood.
So, just trying to put my ducks in a row and do my job as quickly as possible.
Okay.
If you want to set a date for appropriation and I have the information, I can bring it.
Okay.
I can also, fill you in during the budget meeting. It's up to you. I just didn't want to, given the amount of conversation that had taken place so far, I didn't want to withhold the letter and have the whole conversation and a piece of legislation. So I figured I might as well just
Sure.
drop you the note, kind of have a conversation about it now, fill you in on where we're at, and then we'll go from there.
No, I think that's great. I'm glad you did. I just want to make sure that we proceed accordingly and get this done. If we're having the opportunity and council's agreeable, then we can get it done.
Sounds good to me?
So I guess at this point, I'll bring it up, we'll discuss taking it to appropriations or not at the end of the meeting. Otherwise, we'll just discuss it at budget meeting. Got the same opportunity then.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from City Auditor Stashak regarding Coronavirus Relief Fund, House Bill 614 redistribution.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wilson.
I request that this letter gets read into the minutes, please. Just because this is something that we've dealt with over and over again, and it's a short letter.
I need a second. Second, Mr. Slough. All those in favor of reading the letter into the record, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The letter will be read.
As of November 20th, 2020, the city spent and encumbered all the coronavirus relief funding that had been distributed as of that date. This process allowed for the city to be eligible for a redistributed portion of all the unspent, unencumbered funds from the various entities in the county that were returned to the county auditor. The city received a redistribution in the amount of $436,823 $0.77 into our account late last week. The redistributed monies are to be first used for the Resilience Program grants to local 501c3 organizations, and then if there is any unused money, it will be used for the previously agreed upon list, which includes reimbursement of police patrol and line firefighter wages. This round of funding must be entirely used by December 30th, 2020. At this time, it is necessary to appropriate the redistribution from coronavirus relief, House Bill 614 redistribution, $436,823.77 to coronavirus relief number 2209900-other, $436,823.77. By copy of this letter, the law director has been requested to prepare the needed legislation. It is respectfully requested that council suspend the statutory requirements and give the legislation all three of the readings at the meeting on December 1st, 2020, and adopt the legislation as emergency at that meeting.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Thank you for doing that.
There are no committee reports. Legislation.
Third reading for Resolution 30, 2020, a resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Hancock County, state of Ohio, to execute an agreement with Findlay Hope House for the Homeless Incorporated to provide fair housing services for residents of the city of Findlay beginning November 1st, 2020.
Mr. Slough.
I would move for adoption of Resolution 30-2020.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of Resolution 030-2020 say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Resolution 030-2020 is adopted.
First reading for Resolution 32, 2020, a resolution to approve charging utility customers a fee for processing credit debit card payments at the counter of the City of Findlay's utility billing office.
Ordinances.
Third reading for ordinance 2020-126, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the City of Findlay, Ohio to extend its financial commitment to the Blanchard River Watershed Partnership of $5,000 per year for calendar years 2021 through 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno.
I move for adoption of ordinance number 2020-126.
Second, Mr. Schindeldecker. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of ordinance 2020-126 say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Ordinance 2020-126 is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2020-127, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hellman.
I move to pass ordinance 2020-127.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of ordinance 2020-127 say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr.
Not
Hellman.
nine.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2020-128, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the City of Findlay, Ohio to enter into an agreement with the Hancock Regional Planning Commission, hereinafter referred to as HRPC, for the facilitation and preparation of the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, program and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slough.
I would move for adoption of ordinance 2020-128.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2020-134, an ordinance amending Chapter 1100 et Sec of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Findlay, Ohio, known as the zoning code, by rezoning the following described property, referred to as 726 South Blanchard Street rezone, which previously was zoned R4 duplex triplex, to C2 commercial district.
Okay, next.
First reading for ordinance 2020-135, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Okay, next.
First reading,
I'm sorry, Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion that council's rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of suspending the rules of council say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Volkser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2020-135, ordinance 2020-135.
Mr. Slough.
I move for adoption of ordinance 2020-135.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Volkser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2020-136, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Okay.
First reading for ordinance 2020-137, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. That's for the-
Mr. Wilson.
Make a motion that council's statutory rules be suspended and this piece of legislation be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of suspending the rules of council say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Volkser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
And sorry, Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2020-137, ordinance 2020-137.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for adoption of ordinance 2020-137.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of ordinance 2020-137 say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Volkser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
and Mr. Slough.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted. Old business. New business. Mr. Schindeldecker.
I'm not sure if this was announced at the previous meeting. I received an email, I'm sure several others did, from Mr. Russell, probably from the ski chalet in the Colorado Rockies, concerning a planning and zoning meeting on the 12th, on the 10th of December at noon via Zoom. Wanted to put that on the record in case this had been scheduled after, following my last meeting.
Mr. Wobser.
Zoom.
I asked the rest of the appropriations committee, do you want to take up the situation with the grinder that Paul's talked about in appropriations, or would you rather just push that into budget meeting and discuss it there?
I think it'd be better to do it in the budget meeting. We're gonna be together anyways discussing the budget. Two birds, one stone.
I agree with that.
All right,
Okay,
we'll do it there.
asked and answered.
Till
Mr.
Paul's
Schmelzer.
I will try to send out as much information as possible ahead of that, since we are in a schedule for that budget meeting as well.
Thank you, Paul.
Any other new business? Mr. Wobson?
Just wanted to tell the mayor that the Christmas tree looks wonderful. One of the best ones we've ever had, and given the year that we had, it's nice to have a nice, beautiful tree at the end of our alleyway there. Very nice.
Well, I can take no credit. Matt Stoffel and Dave Hans and AJ Kopis scout the city all year long to find Christmas trees. And we found a couple that just didn't seem quite ready, because what we tried to do is find trees that are nearing the end of their life and are going to have to be either removed because they're going to be start to die, or are too close to homes as they get too large. And so this tree was found via social media. We had a number of folks, when I put out the message that we were looking for a tree, reach out and say, hey, we have a tree that we're looking to take down. We're not positive on the height, but it's over 25 feet tall. It is a beautiful tree. It has over 50,000 lights on it. And I actually am currently downloading the security footage so that we can do a time lapse of them bringing it in, putting it up, and decorating, and then in last night's snowstorm. So watch for that to be released on social media soon. If I may, Mr. President,
Sure.
did have a couple of quick items. You have your exciting budget books in front of you. As you read through that, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have specific questions that you want to make sure that we are prepared to address in the budget hearings. Those are going to be via Zoom. And I totally forgot to print off the hard copy directions that I told you I was going to have for you, so I apologize. If you would like hard copy directions or need assistance in practicing getting on Zoom, please don't hesitate to reach out, but I do have directions on how to do that. We're going to make it as easy as possible. The public will be able to view that through our YouTube channel, just like we stream our council meetings on, so that they can watch that. Wanted to mention that the applications closed for the Resilience Program. On Monday, we had 16 nonprofit organizations in Hancock County submit applications, requests over $1 million for that $436,000 that you saw tonight. But I think we're going to be able to meet a lot of those needs, so that's fantastic. Excited for that discussion with the Selection and Review Committee tomorrow. And then the final thing is I actually bought my sewing machine. Now, I did not buy the $25,000 one. It was a long time ago. I just have a nice little singer. But I did buy it there, and I still use it. It's probably 15 years strong these days. So that is great to see that business changing hands and continuing in our community. Are there any other questions or items for me?
Mr. Schindelberg.
I just want to add on, the configuration of the tree, as Mr. Wilson just said, is fantastic. As a person who spent a summer while I was in college trimming Christmas trees on a farm in Pennsylvania, worst job I ever had in my life. I can appreciate that. And not only that, but this presentation on your
On
YouTube,
Facebook.
YouTube was
Yeah.
very professionally produced and very, very nice.
Oh, well, thank you. That was a fun little Friday project for me while watching sporting events. But no, it was a lot of fun. I wish we had all been able to be together, delighted, and enjoy it. But my husband was a generous cameraman, and we had a lot of fun putting that video together.
Very nice.
Mr. Wilson.
Regarding the budget book in front of you, there's a lot of man hours and woman hours in this. For folks that haven't gone through budget as much, there's a lot of great commentary in here from the auditor. He spells things out very nicely, and it's well worth your time to sit down and read it on a Sunday evening. Before we get into budget, it really helps keep things straight as far as where the money's coming from, where it's going to be potentially going to. And it does help our conversations when we get in, well, I guess a Zoom meeting for budget. I was going to say into the room, but virtually into the room. So I'd encourage everybody to take a look at that.
Okay, just a quick reminder that the original is Wednesday, December 9th, starting at 5:30, and then Thursday, the 10th, also starting at 5:30. So just a quick reminder, it's scheduled to end around 8:30 on the first night, and probably 7:30 the second night.
John,
Mr. Station.
if you could announce it'll be available online 7 o'clock in the morning on your website.
Yeah, it'll also be on, a recording of it will be
No,
on.
the budget book.
Oh, the budget book itself will be online. Okay, sorry, Ms. Mayor.
One final thing that I just want to point out, and you better all read the book. It's got a lot of great information. We try to make it interesting as much as possible, at least flip through and look at those budget summary sheets, and then you can dig in further. But worth noting that at this point, we are looking that we'll be giving around $2 million to our carry forward unappropriated balance. We're hoping that that will grow through the end of the year as we see some additional funds come in and our budget finally shake out. But I think that any opportunity I can take to really recognize the work that our department heads have done throughout this challenging year. We have been so fortunate that we have that carry forward balance to be able to absorb some of the potential rocky expectations we had this year and going forward, but we have really managed our expenses well and will continue to do so. But I'm excited that we have really ended the year in a strong position and look forward to talking about next year's budget next week. Thank you.
Any other new business? Mr. Haas?
Well, this just let you know, I work both those evenings for the budget. I have to work till 7 in the evening on both those nights.
Okay.
Just let you know.
Thank you for the heads up. I know Ms. Warnicki won't be there also. But I encourage you still to look at your budget books, and also if you have any questions after looking at that prior to, just submit them either to the auditor or the mayor's office or myself, and I'll make sure that they're forwarded accordingly. So, Mr. Palmer.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to the city plow drivers. They did an excellent job after the snowstorm last night. I had an easy drive on the way home this morning. And my 8-year-old was greatly disappointed school was not canceled.
You're gonna have to break the news that I don't think school's ever going to be canceled again. Now
I know,
it's gonna be virtual. There's no such thing as a snow day.
Yeah. Any other new business? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Greeno, motion to adjourn. Second, Mr. Slough. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. We are adjourned.
I knew you were going to do it, Mr. Honan. I was waiting.
I like being here with you.
You show up anytime, during the day. We'll put you to work.